Thanks for joining us. With that, I'd like to call the Portland Planning Sustainability Commission March 8th meeting to order. On the agenda today, we'll have items of interest from the commissioners, the director's report, followed by the consent agenda. We've got 2 hearings today. For those of you who are here to testify, please fill out a card in the back of the room if you want to testify and hand it to Julie. And also please note which hearing you will be testifying on. We will be limiting testimony to 2 minutes today. Any items of interest? Susan?
Just one quick item, just to let you know, Julie had sent a note around to make sure that you have on your calendars May 17th and August 2nd as extra meetings. And we'll send that around again, but since it's not on the regular calendar, just want to make sure people have that. That's it. Thanks.
So for the consent agenda, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the first thing we have on the agenda is the Northwest District Parking Update Project. That will be followed by a hearing on the Task 5 Transportation System Plan. Before we start the hearings, I'd like to kind of make note that we want to make sure that all of us commissioners have the opportunity to share any disclosures about potential conflicts of interest. Do we have any? Chris?
Well, I'll be transparent, but I don't think I have a conflict of interest. I'm a resident of the neighborhood and own my principal residence, which is just outside the boundaries of the district, but I don't believe would be affected by any of the regulatory changes in this package in any event. And I have a long history of being involved in parking issues in the Northwest, which folks in the audience might be more concerned about, but that does not create a conflict of interest under the law.
Andre?
My firm, Group HEB, is currently employed by Multnomah County, who owns the Burnside Bridge, and the Burnside Bridge is part of the TSP, so I don't believe this decision impacts that one way or the other, but just to know.
Okay, great. Just go ahead and do both.
So for the TSP, again, I don't think so. My employer, Xerox, does business with the city, including being the vendor for the city's red light cameras, but I don't believe we'll be making any policy decisions that involve those cameras. If they do, I will certainly avoid that part of the conversation.
Anybody else? And I am working on a project in the Northwest District. It may or may not be affected by the outcome of the decision today. But again, it's just a potential conflict of interest, so we'll proceed. With that, let's go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Joan Fredrickson with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Thank you for the opportunity today to present information about the Northwest Parking Update Project. BPS has also partnered with the Bureau of Transportation on this project. Here today with me, are they here? Okay, so Bill Hoffman is supposed to be here, but Chris Arms is here from PBOT as well. Bill Hoffman was the project manager who worked on the Northwest, with the Northwest community on the Northwest Parking Management Plan that was passed in 2013. And Chris Arms is the project manager today for the Northwest Parking Management Plan. They're available to answer questions along with staff on the context of parking, on-street parking later on. So this afternoon, I will present information about the Northwest Parking Update Project, which proposes to add a limited amount of parking requirements and provide more flexibility for shared parking in the Northwest Plan District. I'll also go over some minor proposed amendments that I've included in a memo that I shared with you today to improve the implementation of the regulations over time. You'll then hear public testimony, and if there are questions after that or there's any discussion, we're happy to participate. And we hope to conclude today with a recommendation to council on this proposal. Just to set the stage a little, I wanted to share a map of the district area so that we're all clear about the geography that we're talking about today. Most of us are familiar with the commercial corridors on 23rd and 21st Avenue, but I wanted to point out that the planned district goes from just north of Burnside up to northwest Vaughan, and then east to west from I-405 to just west of Northwest 23rd. There's also a branch that comes out on Northwest Thurman to Northwest 28th Avenue, just for context. Also wanted to share the current zoning today in the district. You can see that there's predominantly 3 zones. We have the purple, which is EX, central employment, and then the blue is high-density residential, RH, and then along the Main Street corridors, we have commercial storefront, which is CS zoning. We also have some industrial in the northern area, and as well as mixed commercial along the Thurman corridor there. So what this map also tells us is that the area has a lot of capacity for for new development, for more growth, and certainly the planned district has experienced a steady increase of development over the past 10 years. This growth, layered with sort of the historic pattern, the streetcar era development, where a lot of development didn't have off-street parking, and coupled with the popular shopping district and a active employment area, has certainly continued to create a very constrained parking environment. So just for further context, after over a decade of effort, an on-street parking management plan was adopted in 2013 for the area to begin to further address on-street parking issues and constraints. Under this plan, the existing area parking program has been expanded, and new parking meter areas are being installed. They're underway. The management plan also established a stakeholder advisory committee to be appointed by the commissioner in charge of PBOT to bring sort of an on-the-ground current perspective to the work that PBOT is doing as this management plan evolves. The Northwest Parking Management Plan will also be evolving and taking on new management strategies as they are adopted, notably through tools such as those being developed through PBOT's Centers and Corridor study work. This is also a good moment to clarify that we have on-street parking issues and we have off-street parking issues, and they're both part of the puzzle. Today I'll be talking predominantly about off-street parking. So now to get into the project itself, one purpose of the project is to more closely align the Northwest District Plan area with the minimum parking requirements that were adopted citywide in 2013, and to also provide some modest increases of off-street parking supply in the district over time. The second purpose is to provide to improve opportunities for what we call shared parking, but it's really making better, more efficient use of existing parking resources, such as off-hour excess parking or that type of thing. Just a little bit of history as we talk about the minimum parkings, just to review where we've been. Between 1991 and 2013, most of the city had no minimum parking required for multi-dwelling development in some commercial zones, like the commercial storefront zone, and also when it was proximate to transit, within the 500 feet of frequent transit. Prior to 2003, this Northwest Plan District area had the same minimums as the citywide. In 2003, the Northwest Plan District was adopted, and with that came a standard for no minimum parking required. And then, as you know, in 2013, the city adopted changes to put some new minimum parking requirements for multi-dwelling development over 30 units into place. And the plan districts across the city were not included in that process. So part one of this proposal is the minimum parking piece. As I said, minimum household. So the proposal is to add a graduated household minimum parking requirement for multi-dwelling structures with more than 30 units. You'll recognize the proposed numbers here, as those are the same standards that were adopted in 2013 for the majority of the city. But given its special character and history and its proximity to the central city, we've also proposed a slight deviation from applying these to the district. Elsewhere in the city, higher minimums sometimes apply to areas not proximate to transit. For example, in an RH zone that's not within the 500 feet of transit, you would get a 1-to-1 parking requirement. This proposal applies these minimum standards across the district regardless of proximity to transit. So what we're saying is, yes, in other places of the city you might get a 1-to-1 for RH if you're not too close enough to transit. Here we're going to still use these graduated parking minimums across the district. What you'll see also on this slide here on the bottom, I've provided some quick examples of how many units how many parking spaces you'd get for some sample unit numbers. So if you have 45 units, you'd get 12 parking spaces with these requirements. 90 units, you'd get 30 parking spaces, et cetera. The proposal also carries from the base zone a series of exceptions for when you could reduce the minimum number of parking spaces that you'd be required to install. And this, in addition to mirroring the citywide standard, the citywide exceptions also continues to promote alternatives to the automobile ownership, like bike or car sharing in the district. Oops, sorry. Just one quick note, in the memo, the amendments memo that I provided to you today, we are proposing to rearrange some of the way this is laid out in the code, but substantively there's no real change. It's more so that it flows better with the existing code format. So part two of the proposal is to provide more flexibility under the existing provisions for accessory parking to be allowed to be used as commercial parking. Sometimes this is called shared parking, and you might find me slipping in and out of that verbiage because it's much shorter to use than this long title. But just before I go into this, just a further point of clarification on terms here. In the zoning code, we use the term accessory parking to mean parking that is related to a specific use. It can be on a site or off-site, but it's generally associated with a specific use. Commercial parking is when you have parking that's not associated with a use. For example, a standalone parking structure or parking lot where it doesn't matter who the user is. So today, what we're bringing forward are some changes to update the language in the existing provisions. They're relatively minor in some ways, but they also provide additional flexibility. We're going to be updating some language related to references to a transportation management association, which was never formed, and now we have this Northwest Parking Management Stakeholder Advisory Committee that has taken its place, and so we're inserting that body's title in the language. We're also creating more flexibility in the existing provisions by expanding the allowed users. Previously, we had limitations to only allowing valet parking employees and residents to use the shared parking facilities. Now we're expanding it to any user, so you can accommodate visitors to the area more easily. And we're also allowing short-term parking, which was previously prohibited. And lastly, we're proposing that the code is a framework, and that there will be additional details in terms of administration of these provisions in a PBOT administrative role. In addition, the memo that I've provided today also provides just some clarifications on language and what we think will be better verbiage for implementation to make clear how these provisions apply. So they're relatively minor, but we thought they were an improvement. One thing that I should note here is that because we are now requiring parking in some cases, where previously there wasn't any parking required in the Northwest Plan District, we want to make clear that with this provision for accessory parking to be used as commercial parking, this means that we're allowing both the non-required parking that might currently exist, and also perhaps any future accessory parking that is created to be used under these provisions. So we just want to be clear about that. And before I conclude, I also wanted to just touch on the stakeholder involvement piece of this. Staff regularly attended the Northwest Parking Management Plan Stakeholder Advisory Committee meetings over the last 9 months to discuss issues that have led up to this proposal, as well as potential language and changes to this proposal. The Stakeholder Advisory Committee is comprised of both neighborhood and business association representatives, as well as community members at large. In February, early February, we published a proposed draft of this project, and with that, we sent out public notice to all property owners in the district, as well as hosting an open house. And moving forward, staff will continue to work with the Northwest Parking Management Plan Stakeholder Advisory Committee and PBOT to work to refine the administrative rules. So that's a quick summary of the proposal to help with some parking issues in Northwest District Plan area. After you hear public testimony today, we're asking you to consider the following actions. So, any questions?
One piece of data I'd like to get into the discussion before we hear testimony, and a couple of policy questions just to highlight them for testimony. So I had asked you to produce a spreadsheet, and I believe we're getting copies of these for all the commissioners, that shows the parking produced in development in the district. I don't remember if it went back all the way to the formation of the district in 2003 or quite what the time frame was, but what the spreadsheet points out is if these rules, if the parking minimum rules had been in effect, 388 parking spaces would have been created. In fact, over that time period, 584 have been created, so we're something like 150% of the minimums have been produced just by market forces, correct? Okay, so just to let people think about that as they testify. And two policy issues with the shared parking, and I'm a big fan of shared parking, worked to get it in the 2003 plan that never got implemented. But some policy distinctions, the idea that parking in the neighborhood should be focused on uses in the neighborhood as opposed to, you know, a downtown commuter who wants to park in Northwest and hop on the streetcar. Does the language have any hooks to sort of reinforce that policy? And then the idea of parking displacement, that is that if I own an apartment building, I'm renting to my tenants, I'm not using all my capacity, I want to rent that out to nearby neighbors under the shared parking, great. But what happens if suddenly the price of that parking has now been bid up to the point where my tenants can't afford it anymore, and we're essentially displacing them onto the street or out of the neighborhood? So are there parts of the code designed to address that? I think the answer to that one is yes, but if you could comment on those 2 points, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, thank you. So in terms of, does any of the language proposed have a hook or a backstop for concerns related to downtown commuter parking? As currently proposed, neither the code nor the administrative rules have that. There has been discussion of adding a non-commuter clause into, at a minimum, the administrative rules. We will certainly can consider including that moving forward. In terms of, as you mentioned, the displacement piece, we do have something in the code that currently addresses that. It would be our intent to, if it's appropriate in the code, to carry it forward into the administrative rules as well. But any suggestions in terms of additional hooks or better ways to underscore those are appreciated.
Any other questions? Katie? Mike?
Oh, sorry. I was wondering if you could just really quickly tell me what the exceptions are to the minimum parking requirements. How would you go about and do that?
So what happens is you have a certain number of parking spaces required, and then you have some provisions that allow you to reduce the minimum number by up to 50%, excuse me. That includes, there are some provisions for tree preservation on the site, providing motorcycle parking on the site, creating a public plaza, creating spaces for bike sharing, and creating spaces for car sharing facilities. I think that's most of them.
Would that be all of those, or one of the above, or?
So you can use a combination. So yes, you can use a combination to reach the 50% of the reduction.
Just a
Andre?
quick follow-up. Are those administrative rules for the reductions so they can be changed in the future, or are they code that are locked in?
Currently, they're code that's locked in. They're in the zoning code. So they're in the base zone chapter that applies citywide unless it's overruled by a plan district or an overlay zone.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Eli?
I appreciate that the process of making shared parking easier. Did you think about making it easier than what's shown here? Because it seems like you still have to go in front of a SAC and get a 1-year permit and then renew to a 3-year permit. That might be enough process to get people to do it underground and not do anything at all. So I'm just wondering whether there was do you think in the process that went to come up with this document, there would be objection to making it easier than what's shown right here?
So there was a robust discussion, and there probably will continue to be around that question, whether this is too much of an obstacle to shared parking. We feel like underscoring some of the issues that Chris raised about displacing users from a site, that these are some of the minimum parameters that need to be in place. But there definitely were voices who asked for even more streamlining.
And to clarify that the parking minimums are 0 right now, so someone could just turn a parking lot into a garden or something like that. No requirements for anything to do that. The issue is commercial renting the space. It's not so much losing the space, it's a commercial use on what otherwise would be a residential property. Okay.
Any other questions? If not, looks like not, we'll begin to take testimony. Just a reminder, if you'd like to testify, please fill out a card in the back of the room, bring it up to Julie, and we will be limiting testimony to 2 minutes. We could have Philip Sellinger, Rice Michelin, and Karen Carlson come up.
Good afternoon. I'm Phil Sellinger, but may I suggest that Rick Michelson, who was the chair of the advisory committee, go first? Does that make sense for the group?
And I think that was my card, and you couldn't read my name, so I'm one of the three anyway.
Perfect. I apologize for butchering your name.
My handwriting. Good afternoon. I'm Rick Michelson. I've been chairing the SAC for the last 2 years, and I really want to thank staff for the extra efforts they did to do this project sort of out of sequence. We were too late finding out that the parking minimums the council adopted did not apply to plan districts to get involved in that process. And we had shared parking considerations within the parking plan that have expired because of timeline. So to get these both going quickly, they did extraordinary work. I want to give you some background and then talk about a couple of things. In Northwest Portland, we have 13,000 residents. We have 13,000 to 14,000 employees. We have only 5,000 on-street parking spaces in the district. Under the present permit system, we now have 7,500 parking permits competing for those 5,000 on-street spaces. Now, because some are commercial and some are residential, it's not as much of a fight as you might think, but it's clearly an overload. Over the next 20 years, we're looking at 10,000 additional housing units in the neighborhood. If the present pattern concerns and they don't provide parking, that's another 5,000 parking spaces that are needed to overload the on-street spaces or be provided off-street, even at a ratio of 0.5 cars per unit. That's a need that this begins to address. We don't think it addresses it fully. We have asked to not include the exceptions for use in the district because we don't think they really apply. One is extra bicycle parking. Well, the present code requirement is 1.1 spaces per unit. I'm not sure we should lose parking to go beyond that. Transit plazas really are not relevant. The others just for now mean that we won't get as much parking as we need. We think the appropriate exceptions down the road are for affordable housing and for real transit programs. In terms of the shared parking system, I'm just going to talk very briefly about 2 points. You've gotten our letter and all that. And it's why we've asked for the elimination of Section 3E, the statement that owners or owners of the site have agreed to manage it in terms of their, to provide adequate parking for the primary use. We're asking this to be struck and moved to administrative rules because we don't know how an owner would respond to that and what the answer to that question is. With no required parking in the district, what is adequate parking for your needs? What is accessory? And we think it's better to move that to the administrative rules. We're looking at the administrative rules in the first year, issuing just 1-year permits so that we can see how the program works and put additional restrictions or remove restrictions as we go down the road. We really need that flexibility to be able to make those adjustments without coming back through this whole process each year. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Yep.
Rick, I'm looking at your letter. In addition to the issue around the displacement policy, you raise an issue about the operation of shared parking, that if the SAC ceases to exist, the shared parking program goes away, right? That's in the code now.
Yeah, and I think in the long term, we're looking at people building additional parking to use as shared parking.
Right.
So if this program goes away, what would they do with their parking afterwards? I think it's incumbent on the city to maintain this program, even if the SAC goes away, although I don't imagine it going away.
And my point is that Rick and I were on the neighborhood negotiating team in the 2003 round of Northwest Parking, and we had a shared parking provision at that time, and it basically never got implemented because the politics dictated that the equivalent of the SAC never actually got formed. The political will wasn't there, so shared parking never went into effect. And I think this is an important enough policy, and this will be the trial run for shared parking that we'll be looking at in the centers and corridors zoning. So it behooves us to get this off to a good start, that it makes more sense to build in provisions in the code that keep the policy going, even if the neighborhood politics goes south. So the idea that you've advanced in your letter of the city becoming the operator in lieu of the SAC, to me, is a good one. And I ask staff when we come back up to help craft some wording to make that happen, because I'll propose that as an amendment. Thank you.
Okay, Philip? Oh, you have a question, Jeff?
Yeah, Rick, we were just handed something, which was the chart Chris had asked for that shows the historical development pattern in Northwest. And what it shows, if I'm reading it quickly and correctly, is that the marketplace has been producing more on-site parking than the code would require. So it kind of begs a fundamental question. What are we seeking to accomplish? What are we trying to do here that the market's not already doing?
Well, there are a couple of things, and Karen will talk about some of this more. There are some proposals for very large apartment buildings in Northwest with zero parking. There's one under construction now that's going to have 112 units. Those statistics on that chart are accurate, but they're a little misleading because the Conway projects in the Conway area are required to provide one-for-one spaces. So they're providing their share or more, but in the southern end of the neighborhood that's not affected by that one-to-one requirement, we're getting less. And we need the regulations to encourage some additional parking throughout the district.
Do we have any analysis of what you're talking about that shows X number of units in the pipeline and the lack of parking?
I think that's what Karen Carlson's testimony will cover.
Okay, Philip?
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Phil Sellinger. I'm a Northwest Portland resident and a member of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. But I'm testifying today on my own. And while I was a part of the consensus reached and reflected in the prepared advisory committee letter, I did express to the group my misgivings over taking exception to the exceptions that are a part of the citywide parking minimums code and reflected in the draft code for the Northwest Area Plan prepared by staff. While I struggle with the logic behind some of the specific exceptions in the citywide code, I believe that we need to take every opportunity to promote alternative modes for getting around, and the exceptions attempt to do that. I would have liked to craft a tighter list of exception allowances. The SAC recommended changes to the proposal dictate that we be all the more aggressive in developing alternative avenues for promoting TDM strategies. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Carlson. I am also on the Parking SAC, and I'm also on the board of the NWDA. I just want to jump right into a few statistics because a couple of you have been talking about it. Yes, the market has produced more parking when you look at it on a total. But as Rick said, it has a lot of different impacts and 50% of those buildings met or exceeded the parking standards. 50% didn't. And a lot of it is about location, and developer, because there are some developers who feel a lot differently about providing parking for their tenants. They think it's a draw, and some of them think it's just an expense. So I do think that although it does seem like the market has, there are many cases, and the one project that Rick mentioned is actually 120 units and no parking. So what's under construction right now? We have 406 units in construction. In fact, 3, and a majority of those parking space projects are within a block of each other in an area that hasn't seen a lot of development yet. So looking at statistics, we know that 70% of the units have a car. So when you look at the facts of how many off-street parking, you still find there's a great need for on-street parking. And I'd like to just give you a little example of how this looks. We have these new buildings in construction right now, and they occupy about 1,300 lineal feet of street. The cars that are going to need, based on 70% and the off-street parking created, there's going to be 130 new cars that need to find a place on the street. That takes 2,600 lineal feet of frontage. So there's a demand that's greater as each of these new buildings come online. Yesterday, a pre-app was announced, again, in a similar area, that a 6 to 8 story building with 140 to 190 units with 7 parking spaces.
Can you wrap it up? Thanks, Karen.
Sorry, the code would require 52 to 70. So I do think there is a demand and a need to provide these minimum parking standards.
Thanks, Karen. Yes, Chris?
So Karen, this commission recommended some parking minimums a couple years ago, largely out of the experience on Division. And in Division, there was a situation where there was no on-street regulation and developers were essentially externalizing their parking demand onto the neighborhood. Clearly, that's a problem, and we're catching up. We're building a parking toolkit that neighborhoods like Division will be able to use in the future. I contrast that with the Pearl District, where there is really no on-street parking capacity for residential. It's all been metered. Every developer knows that whatever parking capacity they need, they have to build, right? And nobody complains about a parking shortage in the Pearl. Haven't heard a peep. It seems to me that the Northwest District is a lot more like the Pearl than it's like Division. Right? Everybody knows there is not on-street supply in the district, and you now have on-street regulatory tools. I mean, the pay station just went into my block face last Friday, which was very helpful. Thank you. There are now actually free spaces on my street. This is a good thing. Wouldn't your SAC have the capability to say what new buildings have access to parking permits and which don't? And don't you have the tools needed to deal with this?
No, not now. Right now, in our parking program, anyone who works in the neighborhood or anyone who lives in the neighborhood can have a pass. So as Rick pointed out, the 7,500 passes for 5,000 parking spaces, we don't have a tool yet. We cannot restrict the parking of residents. We need, the ability to do that in the future.
And is that a deficit in the city code or in your current program?
If I could clarify that. Under city code, we do have the opportunity to restrict employee parking and limit it to a certain number. Under the city code, however, every resident with a car or cars is entitled to a parking permit for every car they own. That's code. You will probably be seeing a proposal from PBOT later on this year to allow us, to give us the flexibility to limit the number of spaces. And we're going to begin a process now talking about how we would limit them if we were allowed to, whether they be grandfathered or ratioed or assigned to particular buildings to then deal with their tenants. But under present code, we cannot do that.
May I just add one other thing? I think what we're also experiencing is developers may charge their tenants for parking, $60 a month, say. Right now, a parking pass costs $60 a year. And what we're seeing is a lot of that people are parking on the street. It's a lot cheaper.
So it doesn't strike me that city code for parking minimums is the way to fix a pricing problem, right? The parking toolkits under development will allow pricing above the cost of service.
It's clear that we need, no matter how good we do in mode split, no matter how good we improve, we need a couple more thousand parking spaces in Northwest. The easiest way to produce those now is when buildings are built. In fact, the only opportunity to do that is when buildings are built. So we're looking at the incoming apartment buildings to handle some of the share of the increased parking.
And the shared parking code would give developers a financial inducement to fulfill that demand, right?
Potentially, yes.
Okay, so.
Okay. Next up, Jonathan Avery, Gustav Cruz, Ben Schoenberger.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Avery. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer of Legacy Good Samaritan Medical Center. I'm here today to express Legacy Good Sam's strong support of the proposed code changes, which will allow more flexibility for shared use of our existing parking stalls. The changes would make it possible for Good Sam to share literally hundreds of our stalls with visitors, businesses, and residents in Northwest Portland. A little bit of background, we've got about 2,500 employees and physicians that work on our campus, and we provided care last year to about 70,000 patients that came in and out of Good Sam's campus. To provide the parking needs for all of those folks, we have about 2,000 stalls in multiple accessory lots. Our parking situation is complex. On peak weekdays, we oftentimes have a shortage of parking, so we've done a number of things to try to mitigate the problem in order to assure that our patients and visitors have parking. We've increased incentives for TriMet, we've increased incentives for people to walk and to bike into Good Sam, and we've also actually locked down with an automated system our parking structures in the last year to try to really assure that our visitors have and patients have parking. During non-peak hours, though, we have the opposite problem. We actually have a lot of excess parking availability when most of the physician practices are not seeing patients. And so we'd like to be able to make that asset available to the rest of Northwest Portland. We see it as a huge, big win-win for the city. Reduction in the number of people who are constantly driving in circles looking for those scarce street spots. For people in terms of running businesses and residents, spots available to them to park after hours and weekends. And to Legacy, it would help us to defray the operations of really maintaining a lockdown parking system that we've had to implement. Under the existing code, we've been able to achieve some of these improvements. The SAC has actually approved long-term arrangements, which are okay under the code, but because short-term arrangements are not currently approved, we really haven't been able to go nearly as far as we'd like to in sharing our asset with the community. So we strongly support what has been put forward in the code change. We think that it'll be a win-win for Northwest Portland. The other thing that I'd like to say real quick is that we also support the two changes that have been talked about previously to the code. One is around the rules. We believe that the
Jonathan.
rules.
Jonathan, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Gustav?
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you very much for your time today. My name is Gustavo Cruz. I'm the president of the Northwest District Association, and I'm also a member of the Northwest Parking SAC. I'm just here today representing our board. I'd like to let you know that at our board meeting on Monday, February 22nd, we voted to support the proposed code changes, subject to some recommendations from our planning committee, as well as subject to the recommendations that were adopted by the SAC. And so I've attached materials to the letter that I supplied to the commissioners to outline those. The main thing that we supported as a board and that everybody seems consistent on is elimination of the exceptions from the proposed parking minimums. So both the SAC, the Planning Committee, and the board all supported that change. I guess the only other comment I would make is that we are very appreciative of this effort. I would echo what Rick Michelson and Karen Carlson said earlier. We know that it's extra work on behalf of staff. We're very appreciative of the attention to our neighborhood parking plan, which is ongoing and never ending. We also are very pleased at the work that Legacy is doing, and the new accessory parking changes as applied to Legacy will be very helpful to the neighborhood as well. And finally, I would just say that in my own personal opinion as a resident of the neighborhood, I do think that market forces are not meeting our parking demand at present. So thank you.
Thank you. Ben?
Hi, I'm Ben Schoenberger. I'm here today as a board member for Housing Land Advocates. Housing Land Advocates is a nonprofit group that advocates for land use policies to promote affordable housing. I submitted some written testimony this morning that I'd like to refer you to as well. Our main message here is that parking requirements raise housing costs, and that's the wrong direction for the city to be going in. The proposal on the table is an incentive to build smaller buildings and will result in less housing overall and higher prices for the housing that is built. I think the evidence for this is pretty abundant. There's a 2012 study that was done as a result of the previous change from Bureau of Planning and Sustainability that shows exactly that, and all the academic evidence shows the same. Is when you impose mandatory parking requirements, you get less housing, and the housing you do get gets to be more expensive. So the market is producing parking. I think that was just raised, and I think the zoning code is the wrong place to address the abundance or lack of parking, whichever direction, and that the toolkit that involves adjusting prices to make that parking either more or less available is the right place to deal with this, and not putting a dampening effect on future housing development. These changes, I think, don't be confused that there's a future project out there that if this rule takes effect, no longer pencils out, and that housing no longer gets produced. That project would be on the margin, but those things have direct policy implications. So because it doesn't address the issues of housing production and affordability, our organization opposes the mandatory parking requirements of this proposal, and we think it's taking the district and the city in the wrong direction, that is towards higher prices and less housing. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris, go ahead.
Jonathan, I think you were about to tell us which changes Legacy supported, so if you could quickly just finish that thought, I'd appreciate knowing.
Sure. We agree that C3E should be struck and that the rules be in the administrative rules rather than the code. And we also agree that section C1 should be changed so that if the advisory board, currently the SAC, disbanded, that the parking would still be available and enforced by the city.
Andre?
And concerning affordable housing, it seems to me, if you look at the exceptions in the requirement, you now have a cost of that. So you, with the inclusionary zoning that's just been passed, it's an opportunity, or would you agree it's an opportunity to trade that for affordable housing? This is probably not the right place, but to set the stage for down the road to trade parking for affordable housing, achieve the, get the housing numbers, maybe not get the parking, but there's some trade-off there, and you already have a cost, because now you know what the parking cost is.
Right. I think the distinction too, I mean, globally, is that this rule, implemented or not, doesn't create income-restricted subsidized housing, that definition of affordable housing.
Yeah.
But I think for market rate housing, it makes it less affordable than it would have been otherwise, because it will have to be bundled with expensive to construct parking spaces.
But you could trade those out for more units in an affordable way.
Yes.
In a code, a future
A
code.
future code that, for inclusionary zoning,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Tony Jordan. Doug Klotz. Ian McKenzie. If anybody else would like to testify, please fill out a form and hand it to Julie.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity here. My name is Tony Jordan. I am representing a group called Portland Chupistas. It's a group of probably about 75 people. We submitted a letter signed by 30 people that you should have. We submitted it yesterday, but I will refer to that in my testimony. We oppose the proposed amendments to require the on-site parking that we see here in the Northwest District Plan. One main reason is, as Ben pointed out, the affordable housing component. To our knowledge, it's somewhat concerning that there was not a study or assessment of the effect that the 2013 amendments had on housing supply. How many 45-unit buildings were made at 30 units? How many buildings weren't built at all as a result of those amendments? I don't know that a study has been done. Ben alluded to something, but I think it's irresponsible to enact more policy to exacerbate the current housing crisis without looking at such data. But then from a more just parking management angle, I served on the Centers and Corridors Stakeholder Advisory Committee for Parking and the Central City Parking Policy Update Committee. And it seems to me that we really should be focusing on managing the on-street parking supply to make the market forces create the parking that the neighbors are asking for. It was mentioned 70% of the people in these apartments own cars. There's a recent study by Dr. Daniel Chapman at Berkeley that found that scarcity of on-street parking is the primary factor that determines how many cars someone owns. So if there's free or very cheap $5 a month on-street parking, of course people aren't going to get rid of their cars. But if we can price it closer to a market rate like the Centers and Corridors Stakeholder Advisory Committee suggested, I think that would go a long way towards bumping the appropriate amounts of parking in the areas where the neighbors are concerned. And there's some good stuff in that policy, and I think that should be used by limiting the supply of the permits and charging closer to a market rate. The developers will account for the limited supply. Codifying these requirements will tie the hands of future developers at a time of dramatic social and technological change. In 2013, when this last came up, sorry.
Thank you. Doug?
Hi, I'm Doug Klotz. I'm also a member of Portland Chupistas and a member of Portland Neighbors for Sustainable Development. I'm on the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and I'm a co-founder of Oregon Walks. So one thing that pedestrians have in mind here is that more parking means more traffic. The more parking there is in the district, the more cars are going to be driving there, the more traffic there's going to be. I mean, if you have a limited amount of parking, it limits the amount of traffic that's going to go there because there's no place to park. I hear from Rick Michelson and the Northwest folks about the buildings that are going up now, and yet the tools to manage the on-street parking won't be in effect until later this year. So can we just is it possible to just fill that gap and say, or accelerate something, put in something temporary, so we aren't creating policy, for 20 years that was really only needed for 6 months. Once the parking districts have the ability to charge a higher price, then the market will indeed dictate. Although you'd think the developers would look at that coming down the road and say, I'm going to build these without parking, yet my tenants are not going to be able to park on the street in 6 months. So I oppose this proposal. I think it's going in the wrong direction. As land use chair of the Richmond neighborhood, although I'm not speaking for them, I've seen the effects of the parking minimums going in there. Where before we were getting on a 100-foot by 100-foot lot, we were getting 40, 50 units, like a 30th and Hawthorne, 50 units. Right across the street now is being built a building on the same size site that's maxed out at 30 units. If they built 31, they'd have to put in 7 parking spaces. So they're just stopping at 30. There's 2 more buildings planned in our neighborhood that's stopping at 30, and there's more across the city. There's now the standard plan for 30 units, so you don't trigger parking, and we're not getting that extra 20 units on high transit corridors, and especially in Northwest here, where the transit is better than we've got in Southeast. It's the wrong direction to go.
Thank you, Doug. Is it Lane? And I said Ian.
It's Ian.
It is Ian?
So my name's Ian McKenzie. I'm a resident of Northwest Portland, and I'm also on the NWDA Transportation Committee, although I'm only speaking for myself. And I oppose the proposed code changes. I myself live in a 1927 apartment building that doesn't have any parking, and I don't live in Northwest because, despite the parking situation, I think that's part of the reason that I live there. It's it's the greatest example of a 20-minute neighborhood we have in the city. Kind of almost everything that you need on a daily basis is available either within the neighborhood or within a very short walk to the Pearl or downtown. I happen to work in downtown myself. I walk to work every day. So living in an apartment building without parking is, exactly what suits me, and it suits a lot of the other renters in the neighborhood. And my big concern about this is affordability. Once we start adding parking requirements, it pushes up the price of market rate housing. And I think some of the numbers that you heard earlier are correct, that some of the buildings are building way over what the requirements would create, and some are building way under. But then when you look at the ones that are building under, they tend to be the cheaper end of market rate housing. And so, for instance, the 120 unit building that was discussed earlier, the average size of the units in that is 300 square foot. And speaking as an architect myself, I know that on that site, if you had to accommodate the parking requirements that would be a part of this proposal, that it just wouldn't be possible. And you would either be dramatically decreasing the number of units or maybe just not building that at all. And so I think that these requirements will have a really negative effect on affordability in one of the best neighborhoods in Portland to live without a car. And as has been mentioned, there's been no research done into what the effect of the 2013 code changes was in the rest of the city. And I think before we talk about expanding that, we really need to look at 3 years at this point worth of data about what the changes, what the effect of the changes was before we talk about expanding that to other parts of the city.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Alan Ressler, if there's anybody who would like to testify, please fill out the form and hand it to Julie. Go ahead.
Hi, Alan Kessler. A lot of my points have been mentioned now, but a few things. We have climate change goals. We have mode share goals. This is contrary. Having a minimum parking requirement is contrary to both of those. This is anti-scientific. There has been no study on this 3-year now experiment that we've been doing. What has that done to affordability? What has that done to construction of units? I looked at Portland, Next Portland earlier today. There are 4 units within 10 blocks of me in the southeast that are scheduled for exactly 30 units. There's no reason there would be 4 buildings for exactly 30 units except if this is creating a barrier to adding more units. There are fewer larger units being built on the same property than there would be without the rules in the rest of the city. Certainly, you should not vote on this until you have that information. What has this actually done? What has been the effect? since we're in an affordability crisis, we should have a keen eye to what the outcomes are. We haven't heard of anything about SHOOP, anything about the great lectures that were given on parking, I think it was last summer, that sort of laid out what the toolkits are, what the options are. The Centers and Corridors is doing exactly the right thing. They're building a parking permit that will, instead of providing underpriced parking, will set the price of on-street parking to somewhere where the market can actually have an impact, control people's choices, whether they use a car for their errands or whether they take advantage of the walkability of the Northwest. This whole discussion just seems like it's divorced from what are the actual human policy implications, what are the actual affordability implications, and I'm not in a position to study that. Your staff absolutely is, and they should be giving you this information before you vote.
Thank you, Alan. Is there anybody else who would like to testify? Since not, we'll close the hearing. Can we have staff come back up? Questions for staff? Chris, I know you do.
So Joan, you have a memo with staff suggested amendments. Could you just walk us through those quickly so we understand what they are?
Yes. So on page 2, we have some amendments that relate to rearranging the language that was proposed. For example, we previously had minimum parking. There's no minimum parking requirements except for, and then laying out the household living standards. That's been rearranged to change that language a little bit to the following minimum parking requirements apply. And then the exceptions language that was previously under C is now rolled into those, into the number one point. So the following minimum parking for household living applies, and then exceptions to the minimum requirements are allowed as stated in the base zone 33-266.
So there's no policy change here, it's just a simplification of the language?
Yes, it's
Thank
a
you.
rearrangement of the language to sort of conform with how other code sections are written. And then on page 3, there are some changes to the accessory parking for commercial parking code provisions. We are proposing to add the word existing under 290B, just to be clear that these are, we wanted to make sure that these were established accessory parking lots, just a point of clarification. And then because the proposal under B3, because the proposal, B3 and 4, because the proposal includes new minimum parking standards for even the CS zone, we want to make sure that it was clear that the provisions of this section could also apply to the CS zone if folks chose to use their required accessory parking for commercial parking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me make sure I understand that. So if you were required under these new proposed minimums to build parking, you could still rent that out under the shared parking provisions, is that correct?
Right, but you have to go through these. If you have, for example, just commercial
I see.
parking for a commercial use, for example, if Pottery Barn might have 10 spaces, they would be able to use, if they wanted to commercialize those, they could do that under the base zone.
Without going through the SAC.
Right.
So it's whether you go through the SAC or not.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Can I jump in? Quick question, what you just said, Jim. So if the requirements were passed for mandatory minimum parking, could an apartment developer rent these accessory spaces and have that count against that developer's minimum? So I'm required to have 10 parking places in my new building. Can I go rent 5 from Good Sam, Legacy, or somebody else, or
The SAC lets you.
if, I'm sorry.
So currently, required parking is allowed to be off-site to a
Okay.
degree but you have to be, actually for residential parking, it's not, it has to be on-site. So you wouldn't be able to have required parking, 4 blocks away for residential parking.
That's
You
the
can
requirement.
for commercial uses.
Got it, okay.
So, go ahead, Eli.
I think it's great. The statistic that 0.48 parking spaces per unit, does that cover just the area where no parking is required or also some area where parking is required?
So I think you're referring to the review of parking permits. It was just for the Northwest District Plan area.
Where 0 parking is required?
Yes.
Okay.
For the minimum parking on a development site that has to be provided, can those be leased out to others than those who live in the project, in the development project?
So
If it's a residential project, sorry.
So if it's a residential project and they have required parking spaces, currently the way that the provisions are proposed is that they would be able to use those as commercial parking spaces if they can meet the provisions and go through the SAC for approval. So there may be a situation where they've overbuilt or they don't have residents to want to rent these spaces, then if they can go through the provisions and show that as currently written, to show that they have adequate parking for their users, then they would be able to seek approval from the SAC for commercializing some of those spaces.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a whole host. So I'm going to start at the top. The ideas of the exceptions. So it seems to me, if I look through the exceptions, I guess I'm not in favor of motorcycle parking, bike parking. I would get down to maybe just trees. And the reason is, if I look forward, I look at affordable housing, and if you have an affordable housing exception that they can trade parking for affordable housing, I would want things that are truly valuable to trade, and that seems to me trees are one of our, truly a resource that we ought to keep in the district. But motorcycle parking, I'm struggling with. The bicycle parking, we already have code regulation for, so the shared parking for cars, I could argue, we already have something for. So I'm kind of paring that down and looking forward at the same time. Falling on the same theme, shared parking and accessory parking, and I'm going to use Good Sam as the example. Under Section 3 of your regulation C3, it says that you have to identify the site and the number of spaces, but it doesn't say that they have to identify the users. So it would be informative to me that you know who the users are. And the reason is, if Good Sam is selling those, I understand, or some other user is selling their parking spots for uses, could they trade those parking spots again for affordable housing? And so for a parking lot, for someone that had excess parking at night, could they leverage those through something else to an affordable? Because part of the cost of affordable housing is, as the gentleman in his testimony identified, is car. And could you leverage that parking spot as a counterweight to someone to reduce their affordability of a unit, including parking?
So let me see if I'm tracking. So are you
So
I
if
apologize.
someone's selling an accessory unit parking for whatever, could they say, I'm using that parking spot, instead of selling it, it's an affordable parking spot, and I'm willing to either give it away for that off-peak period or something else at a reduced cost for someone that's living in an affordable housing unit, or just to reduce their cost in living in Northwest.
I don't think there's anything in the provisions that would prevent that. I mean, it seems like something that could be arranged between the owner of the property, of the parking lot, and a building that has units that are in need of parking spaces. I don't think there's anything that would prevent that in.
Okay. But that would be a future conversation in the affordable inclusionary zoning housing to bring that back. You could bring that back into the code at that point then.
Well, one thing would be whether it's an option to do it, and one thing whether it would be required to do it. So
It would be just an option, that someone could choose that option. I just want to make sure we're not preventing anything from coming back.
Yeah. Are you interested in? Okay.
So, but the exceptions, I do want to reduce at this point now. And I don't know, we'll make an amendment. I'll make an amendment to see if we can reduce some of these.
You mean limit the exceptions that would apply in the Northwest District
Yeah.
related to
When we get to
parking?
that point in the recommendations.
So Andre, do you mind if I jump in and ask a question about that? So are they the same exceptions that we are applying to all other areas that require minimum parking?
Yes. That was the idea, was to provide parity in terms of
Right.
what we apply citywide, as well as continuing to acknowledge that these are ways to move people away from individual automobile usage. So.
I have a question, might be for Andre, but for the group, I'm not sure, why would we want to require minimum parking in order to have it available to trade for affordable housing? My thinking is that we've already seen examples where requiring minimum parking suppressed the creation of homes, and the homes that are probably being created without parking are less expensive anyway. And I'm not really sure from my affordable housing background whether we actually get, I love the idea of having inclusionary zoning, but I'm just wondering whether parking is really the thing to be on the table for trade for that, and there may be other things like density, number of units, that might be more appropriate to be in that discussion. Because, parking is an expensive thing to build, and it's going to be carried by the users one way or the other. So just by not requiring it, that's one way of getting some more affordable housing, more units on the ground. And so I look forward to this commission talking about ways to have some inclusionary zoning in the code, but I guess I want to sort of put out there the question of whether we want to sort of stack parking minimums, put a thumb on the scale in favor of minimum densities, of minimum number of parking, just as a way of preserving that for down the road. Well, yeah,
I think it's, to me, the affordable housing question is all tools in the toolbox. The more you throw in, the more options you have down the road. Just from my perspective, there's not a silver bullet to affordable housing. It's probably a stack of cards of the 1% is probably going to get you there. So this may not be a perfect solution, and I agree. Parking is a cost, but if you have something to trade, you have a chip to trade amongst density and a whole bunch of other things, I think you have real money to trade. Parking is a real cost, density is, the bonus is a real cost, and now you have some real money to trade, and the marketplace gets to choose, I think, down the road, what is the best option for them as a builder to meet what this affordable housing question, but I don't want to limit us at this point to saying, is this the best option? And so I'm trying to set the stage so we have as much flexibility as we can whenever that question comes up to say, well, we can do this, we can do that, or no, we have to come back and start adjusting a code here somewhere. And yeah, these are citywide exceptions, but it's the first place, it's our first bite at the apple, knowing what we know now about the inclusionary zoning question coming.
So I'm agreeing that we need every tool we have in the toolbox possibly, and I'm just thinking with this particular one, I'm wondering whether a parking minimum ends up driving up the cost of housing for a whole bunch of sort of market rate, low-end market rate units. by the cost of building all the parking for them, we might lose more affordable housing than we get from the trade by establishing a minimum number of parking spaces required. So I'm all for more tools, and I'm afraid that this tool, if we have a minimum parking requirement, it may end up losing affordable housing because of that trade-off.
So let's go back. You had a series of questions, Andre. Are you through your series, or?
Yeah, I guess the other one is, and it really is to this just whole question of parking and the required parking, and the real question, and Eli is correct, parking drives up housing costs, and it's an issue of equity. Do we have a sense, of under 30 seems to be a breaking point that you looked at as the numbers, but is there a sense that from a marketplace standpoint, we will drive more units under 30 and not get people to build out capacity, that capacity from the required?
I think Jeff's question, sorry about my voice, earlier about did we have good data on a lot of this and what's happened in the past 2 to 3 years since we adopted the other parking, and we don't have a complete evaluation of all of that yet. And so what this project was about was trying to meet in a timely way to bring this up to parity with the rest of the city. It doesn't mean that we can't go back when we get the rest of the evaluation from the rest of the city in the next year or two and take a look at the entire system and say, we're going to change the exceptions, or we're going to change the numbers at that time, or we're seeing every building being built at 30 units. But after just 2 years, we didn't think we had quite enough data yet. So, and then second, in dealing with just an overall sort of piece of advice that I've learned from all of you over the years is that when you're voting on these things, to vote on something because of something that might be in the future has been testy. It's a good idea if you're supportive in the general sense, and that gives you one more reason. But if it's the only reason, then I've seen you all kind of go back and forth and waver around that in the past. So I think it's a good as an additive. Thanks.
Chris?
So to help move this along, let me create a target to shoot at. I'm swayed by the arguments that adding a parking minimum is going to probably reduce the number of units and potentially make affordability worse. So I'm going to move that we recommend the shared parking component only, that we include the staff recommended amendments related to the shared parking, and that we include an amendment that if the SAC ceases to exist, the city may continue to operate the shared parking program in lieu of the SAC. So that's my motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Discussion?
Can I have a question first, and then I'll explain why I'm supporting it? I meant to ask this before we got to the amendment. I'm curious about something that I'm not familiar with. I've worked with the code for many years. The city code assigns to the SAC an awfully high level of authority to actually make binding decisions, as I read it. I'm curious both the policy behind that and the legality of that, because I know there have been cases that say, you can't delegate to neighborhood associations decision-making authority. And so I'm sure Rick has an answer that it was whispered in, but I'm just curious, again, both the background, what generated this decision to delegate such a high level of authority to a neighborhood group, and then two, has the city attorney blessed it?
So first off, these are existing, the Transportation Management Association is an existing, was the existing body that was the body that was supposed to be able to administer these provisions per the 2003 Northwest District Plan adoption. The current Northwest Parking Management Plan Stakeholder Advisory Committee is advisory to PBOT, and PBOT is the one making the final decision. Now, in terms of what provisions can be delegated, out of the code, that's a piece that we are working on, the parameters of right now. Does that make sense?
Couple of comments, I'll turn it over. One, I support Chris's motion. I think the testimony was compelling. We've got all kinds of new regulations. I live in Northwest. I too just had a parking meter put in front of my house. So we're adjusting to a brand-new parking management plan in Northwest. I think a more robust set of rules to allow more shared parking, test the new parking permit plan for some period of time before we go into dislocating the marketplace with these new mandatory minimums is a good idea. We know mandatory minimums will have a negative impact on affordable housing. No one can quantify how big an impact that'll be to balance with the benefits to the neighborhood. So I support where Chris is going with the motion completely. I do want to raise a potential amendment. And I am bothered by the amount of authority that's delegated to the SAC. I don't know their group, even though I live in Northwest, but as a longtime resident of Northwest Portland, I know the neighborhood has a history of contentious issues. There are very well-meaning, engaged citizen activists, and we often have issues that are quite contentious, and there's not clear consensus. And I would hate to delegate to a neighborhood association of any nature the amount of authority they're given. And so I don't have specific language ready, but I would be happy to work on adjusting it to just scale back a little bit. The authority, as I read it, you can't even get your application to PBOT without an approval from them. Now, you can appeal their denial, but I just see very unnecessarily restrictive and complicated ways for an applicant to bring their application for shared parking up to the city level. I just see an administrative roadblock at the neighborhood level that I don't like at all. And obviously, a recommendation, an initial review by SAC is great, but I would want to modify the proposed administrative rules to not make the burden so difficult for an applicant to bring an application to PBOT or a higher level without the administrative problem of getting through a neighborhood group that might not agree with them. So that would be my only amendment. I don't have language to do that today, so I'm not sure what the approach would be. But
So I can provide some of the history on that. I was part of the 2003 negotiation around that created the initial shared parking concept, and it was actually one of the few things that the residential and commercial sides of the neighborhood agreed on. And the SAC is, I think, pretty carefully balanced to represent both of those. One of the ideas behind giving the SAC that control was to manage nuisance. So, it's great if you're renting out your parking lot for short-term to patrons of local bars. It's not so great if they stumble past your apartment building drunk at 2 a.m. in the morning shouting. So that's why you have the 1-year probationary period and then the 3-year renewal after that. Having said all that, I don't mind making it clear that it's a recommendatory power, not a final decision power, if that gives you some assurance.
Yeah, and I appreciate the history. It's not 2003 anymore. There's a few provisions I've read in the administrative rules that bother me. And
So one of the things that you can do when you've been in this situation before is you can have the amendment that Chris put forward, and you can also include in your letter of, your recommendation to City Council, something that said the city should, take another look or review the authority of TMAs, or in this case, the SAC.
So one detail also is that the administrative rules are, they're still being developed, so these comments are useful. The administrative rules are for your information today. The PSC doesn't necessarily have a vote on them right now. The intent is that they would be developed so that the community could understand how they pair with the provisions of the code being proposed, and that they would be brought to council together so they could be adopted together, but that in the future the administrative rules would not need to go to council or the PSC. They would be revised administratively through PBOT. Just a
So
clarification.
Andre, is your question regarding the administrative rules?
Just a quick question for Susan. So a couple of years from now, we would have better data on the housing question that's kind of vague right now. I'm just trying to get, because I don't need an amendment, I'm just trying to see something to put into the letter that, to have come back to us to kind of review this question around affordability and.
Yes, so you could put in the recommendation letter to council that you asked the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and PBOT to work together in 18 months or whatever it is that you need to come back and say what's happened so far and what has the impact been on housing that we can tell, and what has the impact been on the size of buildings.
Okay, great, thanks.
I guess I'm generally agreeing with Chris's amendment with a similar apprehension on the shared parking thing about whether that is sometimes people don't do things because there's a discretionary process involved that they otherwise would do. It would be really nice if it were possible to write a non-discretionary process people could go through for parking sharing. I don't know if that was explored, where it would be predictive. You know, if you do this, sign this agreement, then you can just do it.
The intent.
That's the intent, okay. But they still have to go to a board. They can.
So it's an
am I understanding?
application, it's a very simple, right, the way it's developed to this point is that it's a simple application, very simple interface. And they would fill out that application. The administrative rules are for the back end for PBOT to review it with internally and with the SAC and make a recommendation and then put all the formalities together to send a letter to these folks saying yes or no. Or if there are specific concerns or issues, then those would be articulated as well.
Jeff, did you have a follow-up question?
No, I just, assuming that turns out to be support for Chris's motion, and I'm now seeing 3 votes, I am concerned about the shared parking because I think a successful, easy to utilize shared parking program is kind of critical to what we're doing here. And we're hearing concerns, Eli's voice some, I voice some, that we're sort of delegating it all downstream. And we've already heard today testimony, there's quite a bit of disagreement as to how the shared parking should work, what the rules should be. And so I'm nervous about delegating it downstream to some other group. If we're making a recommendation now on how we feel the Northwest Parking Plan should work, I don't know what our timeline is, if we can take a pause and use the resources of the Planning Bureau to come back with a little bit more, flesh out a little bit our concerns on how the shared parking is going to work, how the administrative rule is going to work, how it's going to be delegated downstream so that before we send our recommendation off, we can craft a little bit more clarity to the collective concerns about shared parking. That's more of a suggestion. Do we have time to do that? Is that just a task we shouldn't take on? I'm prepared to be persuaded that we should just delegate it on and not tackle that. So that's a question.
Yeah, so help me understand the context. I think I understand it, but Joan, you can correct me. So the administrative rules are, the final authority is the Director of Transportation, right?
Correct.
We have no vote.
Correct.
So we can make recommendations to the Director of Transportation, or we can put locked provisions in code. So
Right.
if we want to really control it, we get to write more code. I'm
And
not
the-
sure that's your objective. Probably better served by
Correct.
creating recommendations from the Director of Transportation.
Teresa?
Okay, so it seems, I'm looking to Chris because I want to just kind of feel your direction here. So we have no parking rules for this area because it got left out in the past, right? So it's totally blank slate. And now we're talking about, should we make it parity to what other people are doing? And we're saying, well, maybe that, or the other parts of the city, maybe that's not a good idea because we don't even know if that worked. But then what is our position to move forward for these folks in this area? So if we did not adopt any minimums, then aren't we sort of obligated in some way to say, well, hey, we're going to study this and in 2 years you're going to have really great parking and it'll just be too bad in the middle? Or what do you think?
Okay, so here's my thinking that got me to this place. So, when this district plan was created in 2003, there were no minimums along transit corridors citywide. Because of the way the district plan is structured, it's essentially separated from the citywide rules that we then created in 2013. You know, I held my nose when we voted for those requirements in 2013 because I didn't think they were good policy, but I knew that we lacked tools to help neighborhoods like Richmond deal with developers externalizing their parking demand. My feeling here is that Northwest currently has better tools than any other neighborhood outside the central city to deal with their on-street parking. And if they want to make them better and stronger, I'll go down to city council and testify in favor of that. So if they want to decide that some buildings don't get access to on-street parking, you know, I think that's a reasonable policy choice to look at. But I think, one, the demonstrated history of the market in the neighborhood is doing very well, that shared parking creates new incentives for the market to deal with this. I mean, you can basically add extra parking to your apartment building in the hope of renting it out to people who can't find a parking space. So, you know, I'm opposing minimums for all the reasons that I hated what we did in 2013 and the belief that this neighborhood has got better tools to deal with it than anybody else. So I think, you know, they are not in the dire situation that Richmond was in.
Can I also share a comment? I was not on the commission, obviously, in 2013. I testified against the change. Back in 2003, when Portland got rid of parking minimums near transit, I thought that was a great idea. It was for climate goals. It was uncontentious at the time. In 2013, I think that was the experiment to see what happens if you institute those minimums. And now we're seeing what's happening with that. We're getting 30-unit buildings where there could have been a lot more. So I think that was the experiment that I hope that the PSC revisits at some point. I think that the Northwest parking plan should continue on without the minimums and let the city step away from putting its thumb on the scale in favor of more parking than the market would otherwise provide.
Any other questions or comments? Susan?
I feel compelled to share some information, which I may get the numbers very close to right, but please. And this is something that Joe shared with me a couple days ago, which was when we went forward with the recommendations for centers and corridors and parking and the need for that in 2013, it was because it was new in an area that wasn't used to having so much. So these are different places, definitely. And we found that within a 2-block radius of any new place that you could find a parking spot, that it was like 70% full. So that at most of the times, even at the peak times, 30% of the spots were empty. I don't think those are the same numbers for this area. In this area, it's more like 90% full, 85% full, and at peak hours, 100% full. And so we do have a different issue in terms of demand for parking, and that's why at this point we had made the recommendation the way that we had made it. And I know it does sound odd sometimes to say we want to put this in place and have parity and then come back and look at the whole system and see how it did, and then come back and change it if necessary. But that was the reasoning why we went forward with proposing to have new parking regulations in this area.
But Susan, I would argue that it was because parking wasn't saturated that developers in Richmond could get away with not building parking, that because parking is saturated in Northwest, the developer has to be much more aware of the situation on the street. So I take the same data and get to the opposite conclusion that you just.
I'm not arguing one way or the other. I'm just trying to put out some new data points that I didn't think were a part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, with that, I think we can call a vote. Oh, that'd be a good idea. Chris, you can.
So just to restate the motion, it's that we recommend the shared parking components only, so we're discarding the parking minimums, that we are including the staff recommended amendments related to the shared parking, and the one further amendment that if the SAC should go out of existence, PBOT would operate the shared parking program in lieu of the SAC.
Just a clarification, does that address your question, Jeff? The last point?
Turn your light.
Well, let me give the context before I try to find the words. That, and in terms of managing the shared parking, that we recommend to council that it be that they We want a streamlined application process. We want a program that, whose purpose is to encourage and facilitate as much shared parking as possible. And that applications shall not be denied at the neighborhood level. The neighborhood simply makes a recommendation, but they go to PBOT for review.
So we can include that as part of the letter of recommendation. Or as,
Yeah,
and
I
as part
have
of
no
this.
problem with that as the spirit of our recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, Julie?
Aye.
I'm going to say no, and I'm no because I believe in the affordable housing question.
Thank you.
Aye.
I'm going to vote no because I think the neighborhood needs some help.
I want to clarify 2 points. One, in 2013, I think, the lone vote opposed to all of the parking measures, and I was opposed to it for exactly the issue of the minimums. For all the reasons that were stated today. So I'm going to vote for this, in support of this, since it doesn't have the minimums in, and I want to make that clear. But as a part of it, as a part of, just in general, when I opened up with my conflict of interest, since it is an apartment building and it does have parking in there, I just want to make sure that this vote everybody knows this vote has nothing to do with that. That project may or may not get built, and by the way, at the moment, it's being proposed to have more parking than is being recommended by any minimums, but for that matter. So anyway, aye.
Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you, Joan. So I'm going to suggest just like maybe a 5-minute break, and then after that, we'll follow this up with a Task 5 Transportation System Plan hearing.
I think I've lived in the neighborhood longer than you.